Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hey CTO podcast. I'm Pedro Torres.
And I'm Sara Gonçalves.
And this is a space where you can get to know a little bit better the members of the CTO Portugal community. Today, our guest is Manuel Pais. And Manuel, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. It's a real pleasure to have you here today with us.
Thank you for the invitation. It's great. I think it's a great initiative.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. Manuel, we're actually kind of calling you for the Portuguese name, so to speak, right? I know that you live in Spain, so I'm pretty sure that you're very used to be called Manuel, for instance, right? Like I'm Pedro every now and then. Pedro.
I'm Manuel Pais.
Yeah. There you go, right? So I'm
okay with Sara.
Yes, Sarah is quite consensual. It's a fact. Sarah is Sarah everywhere. I would say, you know what? Today actually we can call you Manuel and be the Portuguese version that we all know and love. And so Manuel, tell us a little bit about yourself and what have you been doing lately?
Of course. So for people who don't know me, I have a background in computer science. For Portuguese people, I went to Técnico, the university in Lisbon, as maybe many of you have as well. And so I've basically have 21 years of experience, and I had a number of different roles. Started as developer, I've been tester, team lead, I've been consultant. And that has been quite a really interesting journey, just looking at things from different angles. And I think that contributed to co-writing the book that I have here, that I have to show, the book Team Topologies, yes. Which came out in 2019. And so
2 years ago.
Thankfully, it's been quite well received. And so all of my work is around the ideas in the book and helping organizations apply those ideas in practice and training and things like this.
Hey, nice. Do you consider that your days are being too busy with all those things around, all those topics around the book?
It's funny because in the book we talk about team cognitive load, and I feel like my cognitive load keeps exploding to new levels, and I think it can't get higher, and then something else comes up. So I'm myself trying to improve and to manage my and minimize my cognitive load, the parts that I can, so I can focus more on what we call the germane, on the actual business or team oriented focus. But yeah, a lot going on between consulting. We have an academy now and training and all these things.
Yeah.
You're a victim of your own success, right?
Yeah, it's a good problem. It's a good problem to have. Yeah, I shouldn't complain. No, but my wife can complain, but I shouldn't.
I'm pretty sure she does.
Yeah.
No, and tell us one thing. Like I think that I've been following you for quite a few years in a healthy way, by the way, obviously, and so I think that I actually had a chance to meet Manuel before the book, and obviously now I'm talking with Manuel after the book. And the book is pretty much something that it's unavoidable to talk about that. And I was even talking with Sarah before we were recording this episode that that a lot of people can actually write a book. So it's definitely there is a lot of effort, and we are going to talk about that for sure. And probably that's only part of the journey, because although one can write a book, not everyone can actually say that the book has been quite a success, like what we are seeing today with Team Topologies, right? Like even I bought the book, I'm reading the book, and I'm having a blast. But I think that I just kind of started realizing that this was actually a thing when all of a sudden in LinkedIn we are seeing hashtag Team Topologies, people creating their own infographics, everyone kind of talking about the several manner or ways to create the teams, and even the Conway's law was super famous, but I think that now everyone talks about it and how we can reverse it in our for our own leverage, and so I think definitely this has been huge, right? Like, did you imagine that this could get to this sort of dimension when you were writing the book?
Not really. I mean, we were pretty excited that the proposal got accepted by IT Revolution, the publisher. So they are the same people who organize the DevOps Enterprise Summits that are quite popular. And so it's led by people like Jim Kim, who wrote the DevOps handbook, Phoenix Project. So it was just being accepted to publish a book with them was like, wow, this is awesome. And was validation that, because these are people that are very experienced and recognized in the industry, was proof that, you know, we had something there that was new, and we had seen it also from our consulting experience. So we expected the book to be well received, but not to this scale where, like you said, people tell me, yeah, my colleague told me about your book, or so one day someone was talking to an old friend of mine from university, and they're like, oh yeah, there's this book, Team Topologies, and he was like, yeah, I went to college with one of the authors. So that's pretty cool. But basically, yeah, we had expectation would be well received, but not at this scale. I think now we're almost at 50, maybe 50,000 copies sold between all formats. So that's really amazing. But especially because of what you said, we see a sort of community that has been emerging, people adding new ideas, and a lot of discussions going on. And for now, all has been quite healthy, and that's also great, because you know things can derail sometimes. But it's been healthy discussion, you know, why team topologies, why not? How does this relate to things like safe or less, and etc. And it's totally fair that there are different perspectives and different approaches. So, but the one thing that everyone says really is that the book brought clarity on having a vocabulary, a way to talk about some kinds of challenges around how teams interact, what types of teams do we have, and then how do we evolve over time, and then things like, you know, maybe a more kind of practical approach to Conway's law and trust boundaries, following Dunbar's numbers, and things like this, which to me are essentially human constraints or human socio-technical constraints that every organization has, but many organizations don't think about. And so they're focused on DevOps, or they're focused on Agile, which obviously are helpful, but they still don't realize there's this constraint about people don't trust each other if they're in this huge group and be expected to work with 500 other people. That's going to be a problem. So if you're not aware of that and thinking about how do we organize and how do we evolve to address these constraints that are not going to go away, well, all you can do is be aware and try to manage them as well as you can. Then yeah, it's still going to be difficult to achieve fast flow, which is what the end goal of team topologies.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I am actually curious not to read the book, because you mentioned some points there that I'm curious.
No, it's super cool.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking here about something. I'm curious about how that opportunity to write a book came up, and why this topic around the team dynamics and accelerating the flow. Was this a pain of yours? Was this something that you wanted?
Yeah, definitely. In a nutshell, we wanted to write the book so we could give the book to clients and say, read the book. It's so much easier, to be honest, than to try to convince and talk to. You have to talk to so many people to get things changing in certain directions. When we're talking about sort of more deeper changes to how teams work, what types of teams we have, how are they aligned to business, all these things are difficult. But to give you a bit of context, we actually started in 2013, we could say, where my co-author Matthew Skelton, he wrote a blog post about DevOps topologies, where he was talking about, look, there's not one way to bring DevOps into the organization. There are many ways, and some are more adequate than others based on your context. There's no single solution. You can have kind of the original idea was to just start having more collaboration between development operations teams. This is back in 2009, 2010, so where it was very different compared to today. But then there were many other ways that you can think about DevOps. Do we have ops people inside the development teams? Do we rely mostly on outside providers, infrastructure as code, and have a kind of platform team? So that blog post got quite popular, and then I started working with him in late 2014, 2015. We met each other at the conference. I was actually interviewing Matthew, And then we started working together. We did an article on InfoQ about DevOps topologies that got a lot of attention. We got, for example, even clients in China that wanted to know more about this. It got translated to Chinese. And so
wow.
There's actually a website called devopstopologies.com, which is about, those different possibilities and a little bit of context on, there's no single good approach to org design, but there are many that can be harmful. And so being mindful of that. And then over the years, between 2015, 2017, 18, I was working with Matthew, consulting for different clients, focused on, they were asking about DevOps and continuous delivery. There was more technical focus, but then we always inevitably end up with the same kind of problems of teams not talking to each other, or teams not having clarity on their responsibility and who they depend on, what can they ask from others. This was a recurring theme. So yes, we could, and we did, provide some proof of concept, tool chain for continuous delivery, which is helpful, but there were other problems. And so we had these conversations. We started helping customers to kind of reorganize a little bit in an evolutionary way, not kind of drastic, but start applying some of these patterns. What is a platform team? How do we help this kind of stream teams kind of upskill and gain knowledge that they're missing, and therefore they cannot do be more effective. And we also learned a lot from other people. So DevOps Enterprise Summit has been fundamental as well. So many large companies sharing their experience, and so start putting the pieces together. And then in 2018 we wrote the book, and now we have examples of companies actually applying team topologies as a comprehensive, or not comprehensive, as a consistent approach that has helped them improve. So that's the backstory.
Yeah. Wow, fantastic.
It must be really rewarding seeing a company following. Yeah.
Especially, obviously, I love working with companies and helping them, but it's actually especially rewarding when someone sends you a message out of nowhere and like, oh yeah, we've done this and this and this and that, and you're like, what? That's awesome. And so we try to publish examples on teamtopologies.com when we have permission. But I've had conversations where we did no work for them, and even we start seeing large banks in Brazil, for example, which is interesting, applying the ideas even in ways and with new patterns that we hadn't thought about, and that's the most rewarding. Just hearing and talking to people, even without sort of any kind of commercial bond, right? They just read the book and they started applying the ideas, and it was very helpful. That's the best.
So let me ask you a question. One thing that I felt when, and obviously this is not slightly or remotely comparable, but when I wrote my master thesis, and it's a tough task, a daunting task to say the least. There was moments in that journey that actually, I thought to myself, I just want to give up. Like I'm tired of writing this. I don't know if I'm getting anywhere. Thankfully, I went through the journey successfully. Sometimes we're really critic. Christmas, summertime, when I found myself kind of really concentrated on that work, and my mind was pretty much anywhere else except on that moment. Did you feel anything remotely like that? So tell us how long it really kind of took to write the book, and how did you kind of keep yourself motivated? If having a co-author really kind of helped being each other's the motivators, or how it was for you in terms of experience? Yeah,
sure. It's interesting. I've had moments like what you're describing with other kind of work, not necessarily the book, but thesis or some article that I committed to write, and then you're like, actually, this is not as mature as I thought I had in my mind. And that's kind of the beauty and difficulty of writing things, is that sometimes you are sort of fooling yourself, thinking, oh yeah, I know what I want to write. I know. Then you actually try to put it into written words, and like, actually, it's not so clear. So it helps clear your mind. for the book specifically, because we had several years of just talking about these things, applying and seeing what worked, what didn't, kind of the ideas were pretty mature. But yes, there's still kind of the pressure of we have to deliver this. We also have our kind of day job, right? You know,
Sure.
we're not. It's not our job, our profession as writers, and so having a co-author was super useful. So kind of a little bit of peer pressure, or or even just picking up. I couldn't finish this review. Could you have a look? And that was really great. So I recommend that to anyone who wants to write a book. Find a co-author, not just for the process of writing, but actually of exchanging ideas and actually validating. Sure. It's super. It kind of multiplies multiple times the value, I think. And then the other piece that was super useful was the publisher, IT Revolution. Not every publisher is, so they are really, curating the collection of books that they publish, and they're strongly related to each other and super valuable. And they have the people with the skills, with understanding of technology as well, but coming from editing background. And so that was also fundamental. If we had written a book by ourselves and published by ourselves, you can be sure we wouldn't have this success. So they forced us to tell a story, forced us, even though it's still kind of a little bit dense at times, but compared to the initial draft, we had to take a sort of leap of faith into what they were telling us. Because someone's telling you the way you wrote it is bad. It's not, it's not good for learning. You're like, shit. But they were totally right. But it was sort of a leap of faith. Yes, let's do this. Let's reorganize. We need to tell the story in a different way, bring the ideas in a different way. And, that was super useful. So yeah, for anyone who wants to write a book, I recommend really doing your research on the publishers, because not every publisher has that approach. Some are more by volume, right? Not as much curation, let's say. But yeah, it was really interesting. The writing took probably, was in 2018. It was about 3 months or 4. It was not very long. So we had to, put in the effort during that period. And then the whole process is like, in length only, is like labor. I think in pain is not as painful, I think, or I'm sure for what my wife told me. But it's about 9 months to get, well, in this case, but for this publisher, to get the book out. And basically, if you miss any important deadline, it can be delayed like by 1 year. And things got worse because now there's shortage of paper and printing, and everything's a little bit and very expensive to print these days. And so, there was that pressure, but at the end kind of helped us to move forward.
I'm feeling like this is being the backstage, hearing the whole story behind. It's really cool.
Behind the scenes, yeah.
Yeah, behind the scenes. And I'm thinking, so it already passed 3 years, right?
2 years.
2 years, yeah, after the book went out. So do you look at the book like timeless, or do you think in the future things will change? Do you think, are you seeing yourself writing a second version of the book?
Interesting. I like that one.
Or even if you look to today's world, the way we work in the last 2 years, things might have changed for the teams, or I don't know. Do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think being timeless or not, something that I cannot say. But several people have said that this, is sort of a game changer for them, and obviously that depends on the experience that people and organizations have. For some organizations, might be not as radical because they're already doing a lot of this stuff by themselves, and also we are building on the shoulders of giants, as they say. We didn't invent Conway's Law. Mel Conway wrote it in 1960 something, I think. I forget now, but we brought concepts together and we added our ideas and our experience, and that's what made it very, very accessible. But going back to your question, yes, things are always changing, right? And we're discovering new ways of working, things that don't work or not. For us, even within the context of team topologies, even in these 2 years, we've learned about new patterns. We've learned about contexts where some things don't apply as well. New contexts, like even outside of technology, where some organizations are applying the ideas. There's a consulting company in Norway that applied team topologies to the whole organization, to finance, to sales, to leadership. And so it's like, well, again, without our intervention or our help. And so things are changing all the time. I think there are core ideas that will remain. And from what we hear, people are really being happy to have these ideas, vocabulary, and so on. But yeah, things change. What we've done is, well, on one hand, we started a Team Topologies Academy, which was on one hand to allow us to scale the training requests that we had by having part of our training being online on demand. And also, yes, there will probably be either a second edition or actually a new book. It's still undecided. Some of the things or the areas we've seen that could benefit from more kind of advice, let's say, or kind of sharing of experience have to do with, for example, things like compliance and security. How do you get those into a fast flow approach, right? Those are often very difficult to change, for historical reasons that make sense. But in today's world, you need to go faster. And so if you're consistently coming across compliance, security as kind of blockers to fast flow, then we probably need to deal with that. But it's not easy. I'll obviously agree with that. And we're starting to we're kind of, like you're saying, Pedro, sort of, maybe we can call it sort of mainstream, getting into mainstream, because we can see the requests we get from much larger organizations, banks and insurance and things like this. And so we know that this work is happening now. So maybe in a few years, it will be possible to write about it and get some useful ideas and patterns, and get case studies as well. Because like in the first book, not just us telling what we think works, but actually here are the examples so people can relate more closely to that.
No,
another
awesome.
area. Yeah.
Almost a second book about kind of, team topologies applied, something like that, and maybe kind of going on a tour of, success stories, maybe, also stories that kind of, didn't go well, kind of, what made the difference, and knowing that, that the book, besides being awesome, because it is, that it's actually happening and it's now starting to have impacts and outcomes on several companies. No, for sure.
And by the way, I was almost forgetting to mention, we do have a workbook coming out early next year, 2022. So we just finished the first review phase. And by the way, the process was very different because it took us much longer because we didn't have deadlines. It was sort of more kind of, something we wanted to do as an sort of extra. And it started with the pandemic, because when every organization was shifting to remote work, we're like, okay, there are some parts of team topology that are super useful for remote working when teams don't see each other face to face anymore. And many are lost, and even the way that we use tools for remote communication sometimes don't really promote the right kind of communication to happen. And so this idea started during the pandemic, and just now, early next year, is going to come out first as digital version, the Remote Team Interactions Workbook. That's the name.
Oh, nice. You also mentioned the academy. That was something that you're also doing today, pretty much to scale the demand for training, to almost to deep dive on the book concepts and kind of how we can apply them in practice.
Yeah, and also
how is the audience of that?
And just to add, we're also doing is bringing in the new patterns, the things we've learned since the book came out into those trainings.
Almost
right?
like,
So it's
I see. Nice.
like almost an updated version of the book.
So that's even more interesting. And tell us something. So, thinking about the book and what you've learned from the moment that it was published, how is that project going? Who are you seeing that is definitely super interested? Are we just seeing more, execs, and engineering leadership more, as the target audience? Do you actually kind of seeing a nice mix between that, managers, and even maybe engineers that are curious about how they can even improve their own teams? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, it's really a mix. I would say it started off more with people with engineering background, because to a large extent, and me and Matthew we both have computer science backgrounds, and Matthew also has some studies around the brain and neural networks and stuff like that. And so it started. If you look at the book, actually, some of the patterns we're talking about for teams are based on engineering principles, things like loose coupling, high cohesiveness inside a team. We're just applying it at the team level rather than the technical architecture alone. And other things that sort of have that background, because that's where we're coming from. And so for engineers, it was very appealing. Also, CTOs and people in that kind of position that want to realize that, especially there are limits to what you can achieve with DevOps and Agile, and there's some delusionment sometimes in terms of, we didn't really change or improve as much as we expected. But then over time, we saw other kind of roles get interest. We saw even quite early on Agile coaches interested. And I think that's partially because, well, Pedro, you, and I think Sarah, you as well, but you're probably more of Agile experts than myself. But I think their perspective is like, okay, we want to help the teams on the ground. And, there's a lot of, I don't know if dogma is too strong a word, a lot of ideas about team autonomy and team empowerment, all these things that, yes, they make sense, but we need to have kind of practical ways to implement that. So I think they saw that in the book, and they saw the idea that it's not just each team individual. It's still, at the end of the day, a team of teams. It's still the ecosystem of teams that's going to get you to where you want to go. And at the same time, improve and promote autonomy and more self-sufficient teams. And then we had architects type of roles also interested, people who are aware of socio-technical systems and the fact that we can't just look at technical architecture and expect teams to, just execute on that. That doesn't work like that. And yeah, I think we have a mix of roles, and also that's what we're trying to do with the Academy. Another aspect is cover different interests, right? So the book is kind of for everyone. And then in the Academy, we start having, it's still early days, but we start having different profiles, people who are kind of more managerial role, people who are more in kind of a platform role, people who are in different kinds of roles. Because one of the other ideas for the Academy is you can't force everyone in an organization to read a book, right? That wouldn't be very productive. But organizations that want to adopt the ideas of team topologies, we need to move away from thinking, oh, there's a group of people that are going to really understand team topologies and then, enact the changes and tell the other people what they need to do. We know that doesn't work. It doesn't work for any kind of transformation. And so we wanted with there's a 3-hour course, for example, that everyone or almost everyone has going to be affected can take, and in 3 hours understand why are we doing this, right? Not just someone comes and tells them, well, now you are a stream-aligned team and you need to do this and that. It's probably, you're not going to get engagement. You're not going to get buy-in from the individuals and the teams if you take that approach. And that's a work in progress, because I still see that very often where get contacted and customers expect or think that this is just for a group of some people who are going to do the changes, but you need some baseline understanding across the organization. Otherwise, you might come up with a lot of challenges and misunderstandings. People who are not really engaged because they're being told to do things differently without kind of the background.
Always start with the why. I agree.
Exactly.
And it's good to have different roles and all those roles, because the team is made of them, right? You don't have just a group of same people working together. So joining other roles and having other roles concerning the good collaboration, I think that's important, and it's good that you are seeing that.
Yeah. I think the latest kind of group of people is more around product managers. People like John Cutler, who is quite well recognized in that domain, reference team topologies a lot. So that's part of the reason. And that's exciting as well for me to bring together this and move away from this split between product and technology, because okay, if you look at the business, then it crosses both. So why do we split along those lines when it's, obviously when it's a very kind of formal split?
Yeah. So I think I heard something about that. Already lived in 4 countries, not Spain. That
you're cutting off a little bit, Sarah.
Well, of course. Sorry. Yeah, my internet. I'm seeing here a sign. Sorry for that. Are you listening to me right now?
I think yes. I think I understood
now I think it's better.
The question.
Yeah.
Yes, I've lived
Yeah, I was going to ask how do you see the tech scene in Portugal after living in all those different places? How do you look at Portugal in a technical perspective?
I think I graduated in 2000, and I think it hasn't changed a lot in the sense that it was already very good back then. We didn't have all the kind of startup environment, which is great to have that recognition and companies coming and wanting to start their business or have their stuff working from Portugal. I think that at the technical level, it has always been high, and I don't think that has changed. And I'm not living in Portugal, but I've helped co-organize the DevOps Lisbon meetup for several years, and we can see how different people from different parts of the world coming and sharing experiences, and I think that's always useful. I think also, on the other hand, what I've always noticed, maybe Pedro and Sara, you've noticed that as well, because I know at least you, Pedro, you've lived in the UK as well. Kind of the ideas tend to take a bit longer to get to Portugal, but also in Spain, for example, where I am now. I don't really know why. Maybe it's just motion of things tend to, start more in UK and northern countries and in US. Not always. Sometimes the US is a bit behind as well. And then make their way to the south, which is fine. But sometimes, I wish, it would take hold faster. But with the example of DevOps, right? We started the meetup in 2016, I think, with my friend João Miranda, and it grew quite fast, but in the beginning we were like 30-40 people, which for us was great. We already have these people who are like-minded, and now they're more than 4,000 members. So, but it took about 5 years to get there.
Oh, for sure. Manuel, well, the conversation has been great, but we are now kind of getting close to the end. And, and me and Sarah, we usually love to end our conversation asking about usually two things that we've been kind of, asking to everyone that we are meeting. And so the first question that we have for you is, if you could have dinner with anyone at all in the world, who would that person be and why?
Okay, this is the question where I'll either be seen as lame or super cool, right? But I have to go to my. Can I say 2 or no?
Sure. Okay. Fine. It will be a dinner of 3. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. So if I go to my kind of childhood and kind of my interests, I would love to have dinner with Michael Jordan, because not just obviously from being, the best player ever to play basketball, in my opinion, but just his mind is like everyone says. There was The Last Dance, the series, that he's super competitive and he competes about everything. So it'd be funny just to have that experience and see that reflected in reality. Like, I don't know, see who maybe he competes, who drinks faster or who eats faster. Or I don't know. It's just would be really, really cool. Besides, well, probably I wouldn't be able to say much. I would just be in awe of
Exactly.
And then the other one, more in our domain. So many people who are references, and like I said, we build on shoulders of giants. People like Martin Fowler and Dr. Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble. Dave Farley actually had dinner with him because he came to a meetup at DevOps Lisbon.
Oh, wow.
That was cool. I would probably say Kent Beck. I met him at the conference as well. That was cool. I would say Martin Fowler, because he has an interesting position. He's at ThoughtWorks, and he's kind of he's a thought leader, and his role is really just to, if you look at his blog, he doesn't write much anymore, but he brings in people with new ideas, and he kind of gives them the platform. And I know he's brilliant, and I think I would love to hear directly from him about how he sees the evolution of computer science, the things that are problematic still or not, because he has that kind of experience, but also way to articulate things that I think is super interesting. And I know he's a bit shy, so it would be cool to have a dinner where we can talk and not that just directly with him. Yeah,
that'll be a nice dinner for sure with three people.
Michael Jordan would love Martin Fowler. I'm pretty sure of that.
I was trying to picture that. Yeah. So let's go for the final question. I'm curious about something. So you have 3 kids, right?
Yes.
That seem to speak 3 different languages. Is this true? Do you usually speak 3 languages with them?
No, I speak 2 languages pretty well and 2 languages okay-ish. But they will speak 3 languages natively. So one is the oldest is 7, the other is 4, almost 5, and the youngest is 1 year old. But because we live in Spain, their kind of native language at school and everyone around them is Spanish, obviously, Castellano. And I talk to them in Portuguese all the time. I'm not, except if there are people around that only understand Spanish, so I don't want to be rude, but directly with them, I speak Portuguese, and my wife is from the West, so she speaks English to them. So they already have the 3 languages.
Wow.
Obviously, they mix up a lot, especially Portuguese and Spanish.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, with that age, so new.
But when they're older, they'll be probably have these 3 languages almost as native language, as long as they practice. And it's pretty funny to see the 4-year-old kind of, he speaks mostly Spanish. He understands everything in Portuguese, but then he's speaking Spanish with Spanish people, and sometimes he uses Portuguese words. Obviously, he's not aware. And I'm sometimes like, what did you just say? That's a Portuguese word.
That's very curious. I imagine his head, how he's learning and associating all the things.
Yeah. With the oldest one, you can see that he makes a sort of more conscious decision. I'm talking to this person in this language and that person in that language. The smaller one, the one in the middle, mixes up more, but it just it tends to take a little bit longer for them to develop their their verbal skills, they say, when you have mixed languages. But then once they do, it's great, right?
Yeah.
And do your wife understands Portuguese? So could you actually have, dinner time? Let's say you're talking in Portuguese with your kid maybe like replying back in Spanish, and you're like your wife kind of understanding it also. Does that dynamic actually work?
Yeah, that works. So we're facing the kids. I will talk to them in Portuguese. Obviously, sometimes I'm not even aware, and I might be speaking English just because the conversation has been going in English. But yeah, there's that sort of exchange, and with the grandparents is where things get more complicated, right? Because we might not be aware, and they're not understanding because I'm actually talking to them in Portuguese, unless I want to talk to them in Portuguese and other people don't understand. It can happen as well. But yeah, it's interesting.
Very well.
Very cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think that's it. Definitely ending the today's episode with a very kind of funny and positive note. So thank you everyone for watching today's episode. We really hope that you got some insights, some inspiration, that you get to know a little bit better. Manuel, not only the co-author of such an amazing book that is Team Topologies, but also the person, the individual. And so we hope to see you again in our next episode of Hey CTO. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.